You are watching Xirtus.
Because there's a whole generation of people that are said, well, why would you want to be any, like, you don't want to be her husband in that character. You know what I mean? You should be Leonardo DiCaprio, or you should be one of these other, like, you should be Magnum PI, you should be Indiana Jones, you should be someone who doesn't live for the, I mean, the all the goals are shifted backwards and inverted.
Zizek makes a good point about Titanic, that what she's doing is essentially slumming it. And there's something kind of vampiric around like the class issue that's so highlighted throughout that movie because it exists at the time, but then it's really expressed with the sinking of the ship when everyone's fighting to, save themselves. But oh, that's funny. But yeah, Zizek, he argues that if suppose they had survived and gone wherever they're going to go, and she leaves her life behind and what she's used to, which is basically lots of money and being well taken care of with the help and whatever, it probably wouldn't last very long. And she'd probably become increasingly annoyed by his freedom mentality.
The dude
like
spits
that,
on the floor.
you're gonna draw me like one of your French girls, Jack? It's like it's not gonna last. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, I just saw that you draw. That's your job. You draw women all the time. Yeah, there's no way. It's like it's clearly it's a great boat ride, and the fact that this dramatic, crash of the boat while they're 17, so it's like so dramatic. You know what I mean? And
What do you guys think about that other ship? What was it called? The one that people argue was the
Lusitania or whatever.
no, no,
No,
no,
not the Lusitania.
the one that there was two ships that looked
The
extremely similar.
Britannia.
The
The
Britannia.
Britannia, I think.
Yeah. What do you think? Are you guys familiar with that? What do you think about it?
So that
I
it
mean,
was the
it's
JP Morgan insurance scandal where he didn't insure the Britannic, and the
Yeah.
Britannic had some issues. So and he kind of like painted the Titanic or he took the Britannic, made it look like the Titanic, and then intentionally sunk it so that he could claim the insurance money that he didn't get the first time it got hit. So really, it was just the
Right.
Britannic that basically got hit twice.
Well, there's a bit of
And
ship of Theseus here because you're building ships. You take parts from ships and put them in other ships. You keep a ship going for 20 years, and so this theory holds water.
Well, and you jerk. The biggest one too is the clocks. Apparently, there's not a lot of record on what the clock looked like in the actual Titanic, and even in the movie, they based that like grand staircase and that big grandfather clock was all based on the Britannic's version of this. And I gotta ask, have you guys heard of the gold smelting theory on this?
what do you got?
Yeah.
That the whole reason because the records show that the Titanic had an engine room that was on fire for like 3 days straight. Literally, as they were like going into a port and picking people up, and they got on and they would go to the next port.
What?
For
And they just
3
didn't
days,
know?
they knew, but there was just one particular engine room that was just constantly on fire the entire time. And the theory was that they were smelting gold in the one particular room, and that's why they actually went through the Arctic waters is to counteract sort of like the intense heat that they were using to smelt gold. And that car that Jack is like banging her in, like that's essentially made out of gold. And after they leave, they melt that car down. They take all the bed frames, they melt the bed frames down. Everything there was gold so that they could create like basically the funding to create the Federal Reserve. And that
Okay.
the hull was weakened because of that engine room being on fire for smelting gold. And the little like cherry on top of this theory, which maybe be less plausible, is that they weren't like too full of themselves and thinking that this boat is too big to fail, so that they didn't skimp on the life rafts. What they did is they used the life rafts to basically ferry out all of the gold that they had smelted on board before it sank, and that's why they
Oh,
were short
shit.
on the safety boats.
Oh, I never heard that part. I know that there's connected to this theory of the insurance thing and the other boat, etc., is that there was like a Jesuit conspiracy against the Federal Reserve, and that on the Titanic there happened to be like some of the world's richest people that were also opposed to the establishment of the Federal Reserve, and so you have this, the future of basically people literally essentially turning in their gold, trading their gold for paper.
It goes
how
so
do you
much
convince
deeper than
people
that too, though, man. Because the main one of those was Jacob Astor. There was like 3 main dudes, but Jacob Astor was the main one. And not only was he opposed to the Federal Reserve, but he was the last remaining financial backer of Tesla. And Tesla had already ran afoul of JP Morgan and company, right? Because he found out that Tesla was taking his funds and trying to maybe use it for like some free energy thing, and that wasn't kosher. So they ended up giving it over, and his only backer was Astor. So when Astor's gone, Tesla's funding is all gone. So and there's a few other little notes of this too, because JP Morgan was a member of the Jekyll Island Hunt Club, along with like 2 or 3 other people that were also booked to go on that exact same excursion, and they all basically canceled their tickets around the same time that JP Morgan unexpectedly doesn't go, even though he had an entire like suite built custom made just for him for this voyage. He doesn't go. He also calls up Hershey of Hershey Chocolates, and he tells him not to go, along with like 2 other dudes. So
yeah, it's like Israelis on 9/11. You don't go to work that day.
exactly, dude, exactly.
Or Saudi Arabians, or just people with connections.
Just people. Right. Anyway,
people
Violet Jessup.
What are you gonna do?
Do you know who Violet Jessup is? Right. So I always like this one. She survived. What was it? The 3 shipwrecks: the Titanic, the Britannic. I think the Britannic twice or something like that. So Irish Argentine ocean liner stewardess and nurse in the early 20th century, Jessup is well known for having survived the sinking of both the RMS Titanic in 1912, her sister ship, the HMHS Britannic, in 1916, as well as being on board the eldest of the 3 sister ships, the RMS Olympic, when it collided with the British warship HMS Hawke in 1911. So it goes Olympic 1911 Hawke crash, 1912 Titanic, Britannic 1916. She's getting around. She's on all of them. You know what I mean? There's something special about this lady.
You know what's also interesting is they always throw out the RMS, but I believe when it got purchased by JP Morgan, his was called the White Star Line, and there's all sorts of occult connotations to like the falling star, which is literally the Titanic.
Oh, dude, yeah. So there's a Wise Blood sync with the 1950s version of Titanic with Robert Wagner, which is really weird because it kind of does with the album pairing. It kind of like synchronizes with Natalie Wood, because there was the whole thing of like who framed Wabba Wagner, because he's but anyway, she keeps repeating this thing about stars in the album. There's very specific lyrical content when you're watching this movie, which you can this is incredible to watch, because you can see many places where James Cameron took directly from this movie for like how certain shots were done, like, and even the storyline, the nature that you have this drama, because there's a lot of different versions of like the Hollywood Titanic movies, not just Hollywood. Like there's a German silent film too of Titanic that's even earlier. But yeah,
there's the book that the Titanic event was based on too, Futility, right?
Right. So totally. So this specific version of Titanic seems to be the most that James Cameron took from. And so it's really it's a trip to watch, because this album is called Titanic Rising, and her explanation of it is the way that she was impacted in her youth by movies in general. Like there's a song about movies, and like being and the difference between film and a movie is something she talks about in her, like what the movie Titanic was for her growing up, with all the emotion provoked and everything. So you're listening to an album where she's like explicitly referencing the 90s Titanic, and to watch it with the 1950s Titanic is really beautiful. So yeah, I recommend that. It's in my highlights, and it's also on the website. But yeah.
I'm just looking at pictures of Who Framed Werner Herzog. I feel like that could be a really good movie. Alrighty, can you imagine it?
Are you just over there just producing AIR like on the fly right now?
When we find out who it is who is framing Werner Herzog, we will understand why we are Werner Herzog in the first place. It is like the skin that is worn of a rabbit. I'm sorry. It just feels like that could be. That's the movie for me.
Yeah, this has got to be all real time, because he's on the Bing.